So the official ramp up to the 2023 NFL season begins today. Training camps open for rookies. 9 teams across the league, Falcons, of course, included. So that means Bijan Robinson, Matt Bergeron, Zach Harrison. The whole 2023 class is expected to be in the branch today. And of course, veterans by July 26th. Now, speaking of running backs and Bijan, you talked about FanDuel, right? And how
Yes.
FanDuel will give you your $200 instantly. Well,
Yes.
there are some players, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, that thought yesterday they were going to get their money quickly. And from what all reports are, Saquon was the closest, but
Yes.
didn't get it done. So he tweeted out, it is what it is. And that's where we are today as far as the running backs. And it really is kind of disappointing when you think about the fact that this position is one that has franchise tag on it around the $10 million mark.
10 minutes. Yeah.
But 6 years ago, it was 11 closer to 12. So
It's
how
going
is
down.
it that position, which is so coveted by Arthur Smith and the Falcons, how is it that position is so devalued? I mean, he's building the Falcons offense around this position. So how is it, first of all, and why is it, first of all, that for players who will get you the tough yardage,
Mhm.
players who will block some of the monsters coming from the
Yeah.
defensive front for the other team, and in this case, also, these are guys who are good at catching. They're pass catchers as well out of the backfield.
Mhm.
Why? And how is that position so devalued in this day and age?
Like say 12 years and look at what was considered to be consistent and good as far as passing yardage, right? We were talking about between 3,500 yards or
Mhm.
even maybe even 4,000. Some of the elite guys were throwing 4,000. Now some of the elite guys are doing 5,000 yards, even more. Like Patrick Mahomes and even Peyton Manning, and before he got up out of the league. So I think that some of that value has been moved from them, being that it's quote unquote a pass happy league. Everybody uses that moniker from time to time.
Right.
So that's why the position has been devalued. But my whole thing is like, if we are, and it just kind of, if I could just take a point from, how the Hall of Fame quarterback's going to be looked at and how they're going to be judged in
Yeah.
this era,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to be devalued because they understand that, hey, defenses aren't allowed to do what they used to be able to do. So if we're judging quarterbacks off of that moniker too, why aren't wide receivers being devalued, T? Because we see a lot of wide receivers coming in here, they out here balling. Now, let me say this. I'm not talking about Jamar Chase and
Right.
all of those guys, but there are a lot of guys that have been circling around and floating around this league. They can get you 1,000 yards that you probably never even heard of.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, why are we then devaluing the running back position when you have to do all of what I just said, like you just said, blocking, running, and then you tack on the guys that can actually catch the ball out of the backfield? Why are we devaluing these guys if you're adding on task to what they have to do and taking some of the value away from the wide receivers? Because you can go out and get a wide receiver in the mid rounds and he can be an absolute baller. You know what I'm saying? Even going back to Antonio Brown days. So
Mm-hmm.
right now, T, I really feel like sucks. It sucks for this position because these guys are asked to do so much. And you know what? I really feel this was one of the reasons why. Now it was a small one. It was one of the reasons why I was like, man, why are the Falcons doing this? Because at the end of the day, all the teams are, and I feel like Bijan Robinson should be concerned. T.
Yeah, he absolutely should be. And I think going back to the wide receiver position, why is it not devalued? Because it is tied to the quarterback position. Period.
That's
That's
not fair though.
It's
Yeah,
not, but that's the reality of it. But
it's
that's the
reality.
reality
But
of
yeah,
it. And it's not fair because if you think about the wide receiver and the tight end, by the way, that's why that position is not devalued either, because that's kind of that hybrid position. But if you look back at the Chiefs and their run, and you look back at the Eagles and their run, they can't do it without Isaiah Pacheco, and Miles Sanders. It does not happen where it's just going to be the quarterbacks throwing. When you get deep into the playoffs and you get teams that are as equally talented as you are, that's where the game starts to separate itself, is who can get third and short with a running back versus having to float it down the field, and hope that maybe it gets caught. So I think that maybe the league should be looking at it from that perspective, like the fullness of an offense is shown and needed later on in the season versus, where it is now. But I will tell you this, I think that college running backs are starting to get it. And I think that Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and those guys are examples of the trend that is happening with running backs, meaning they can be bruisers, they can get you the third down yardage, or they can go for long runs, but ultimately, can you catch? I mean, how many times did you and I see Bijan Robinson lined up in the slot, lined up as a receiver? So running backs are starting to figure this thing out. Like, okay, just like tight ends started figuring out and they were pushing the envelope and saying, you got to pay us more. You got to pay us closer to what you pay the wide receivers. I think the running backs answer to not being respected in the league is to say, you know what, then I'll get the skill set that you value. I'll become a good pass catcher out of the backfield. And then let's talk about it. So I think, to your point, Bijan Robinson, yeah, he may be disappointed, but I also think that this current wave of running backs might be the ones that push the envelope to say, hey, we need to get back to a franchise level hire. We need to get back to you understanding the full value at the running back position.
Yeah, and when you think bringing the Detroit Lions into this position, when you talk about Jahmyr Gibbs, those are some of the things that you're going to have outliers, right? Like the Falcons may end up paying Bijan Robinson like he needs to be paid. That might happen, and then once Jahmyr Gibbs, if he pans out as well, they might do the exact same thing. But it's truly unfortunate that we're talking about two teams that are willing to, step outside of their boundaries and step outside of what everybody is doing and all the cool kids are doing and everything, and quote, throwing around all these pass happy, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
I commend those teams, but it shouldn't be just two teams out of 30 that potentially could pay running backs what they're worth, because that is something that is just truly unfortunate that these guys have to deal with.
It really is, because when you look at the draft, like you said, those two players, Bijan and Jahmyr, went in the first round, right? Yeah. So you don't get another running back to be drafted until the middle of the second round. And then you have to wait again until about the middle of the third round. So I do think that there is going to be some continued conversation about how to position, no pun intended, but position that position to indeed be one where you can see the value that it is. Because again, I go into the depth part of the season, right? Mm-hmm. When you're scheming for, and especially when you're scheming for, after a while, you kind of scheme for the receivers, right? And think about, and the passing game, think about when the uptick got there for Tyler Algier. Now, granted, some of the uptick may have been as the season wore on and he got to play more, he got better. I'll grant you that. But I'll also grant you that as the season got better, or as the season progressed, those teams that the Falcons were playing got worn down by that run game. So I do think that there's value in it. Also, if you have a coach, to your point, like an Arthur Smith, who knows what to do with the run game.
Yeah, I think that, Arthur Smith, I commend him for going this route, right? Because I'm looking forward to a lot of these experts and guys who are so hell bent on promoting quarterbacks and wide receivers, like you mentioned earlier, and prove them wrong. Because at the end of the day, like you said, once the game slows down in December and January, the teams that run the ball the best, they typically are going to go pull that bad boy out. Because I even go back to that Super Bowl that Peyton Manning won with the Colts. Dominic Rose was the guy. He was the guy that was the catalyst for them, and Bob Sanders as well defensively. Mm-hmm. When we talk about offensively, for them be able to run the football like that and be balanced. We know Peyton Manning can throw for 400-500 yards, but when you're talking about balance, putting that balance in and bringing that balance in with a running back that can get the job done, that's the moneymaker. Those are the championship level type teams, and I hope that Arthur Smith and Dan Campbell can be guys to champion it and also prove that it works. And essentially, because how the thing go in NFL,
right?
Like when it's a copycat league. So if Arthur Smith messed around and goes on a run and gets to goes to the Super Bowl, or if the Lions get on a run and go to the Super Bowl, did I just say that? The teams are gonna start, say, you know what? We might need to get back to running the football a little bit.
Right. Or if you have a team like the 49ers and they end up going with a Brock Purdy, and he becomes more of a game manager, and Christian McCaffrey gets them there, I think that's going to be huge as well. You're going to need some names at the running back position to be the obvious catalyst for how their team got deep in the playoffs, if not to the Super Bowl. And you're right. Like, there was Tony Pollard literally carrying the Cowboys on his back when Zeke Elliott didn't look like Zeke Elliott ever again last season. And we looked at the fact that, okay, your quarterback, Dak Prescott, doesn't really look like Dak Prescott, the good Dak, right? Mm-hmm. So where do you go? To Tony Pollard. And he's the one that gets you through the season and keeps you in contention. So yeah, hopefully maybe this will start some conversation for teams to reevaluate how they value their running backs. What do you guys think, though? We know that Bijan Robinson being drafted at 8 was an issue. We know that shocked the world, and that kind of frustrated some of Falcons fans. But do you guys see the value? Do you see the rationale, or what Arthur Smith's thought process was in getting Bijan, and even the Lions getting Jahmyr Gibbs? Or are you on the side of saying, running backs, they're a dime a dozen, just like wide receivers. We get one, we use that person, and we get them out? Let us know by putting a comment in the chat when you check us out on YouTube. And of course, don't forget to check out ATL Day Ones wherever you get your podcasts.